Hello world, Tate here, back with your hacking news roundup. First up, we have probably the best Wi-Fi hack of the entire year, a totally new technique introduced to the cyber battlefield by Putin-backed hackers. This is coming from researchers over at Velocity, who are calling this the nearest neighbor attack. Organization A was the target. All we know about them is that they're a company based in Washington DC, which works on projects involving Ukraine. Initially, the Russians launched a password spray attack against their internet-facing online portal. This is essentially a brute force, trying a bunch of username and password combos against the login page, either common credential pairs or credentials obtained from a data breach. And it worked, except for the fact that the Russians were met with a multi-factor authentication prompt. There was no way to gain access without a physical key. However, this MFA requirement only applied to remote connections made over the internet. If the Russians turned up in person and connected to Organization A's Wi-Fi network, they'd be able to use that credential pair to log right in without needing a physical key. But the Russians weren't too keen on sending a risky Mr. Robot to gain physical access. The threat of their agents being caught and interrogated by the CIA probably wasn't a risk they were willing to take, and for whatever reason, the idea of landing a Wi-Fi enabled drone on the top of the office building, which has actually happened IRL before, didn't sound too appealing. Instead, the Russians came up with a totally new attack method, the nearest neighbor attack. It works like this. The Russians remotely hacked into a totally different company in a nearby building, an easier target that didn't quite have the same level of security as Organization A. Then they moved through that company's network until they found a computer that had both a wired internet connection and Wi-Fi capabilities. Then they used that computer as a conduit to connect directly to Organization A's nearby Wi-Fi network. It's genius and a totally new attack method never seen before in the wild. It just goes to show how a system is only as strong as its weakest link. Once they were in, the hackers didn't deploy malware on Organization A, but rather they used built-in Windows functions to locate and exfiltrate data, a technique called living off the land. Initially, this did make it difficult for researchers to attribute the hack to any particular group, but there's only so many people interested in Ukraine, and when researchers found significant overlap in the vulnerabilities and techniques used in a Russian campaign documented by Microsoft, it became clear who the culprit probably was. A Russian state-backed group that Velocity calls Gruesome Larch, otherwise known as Fancy Bear. Next up, cybercriminals are getting creative and ditching phishing emails in favour of real physical IRL paper mail. Switzerland's Federal Office for Cybersecurity has put out an alert warning of letters arriving in the mail which impersonate the country's meteorological agency, encouraging people to download a fake weather warning app. The letters exploit Switzerland's notoriously hazardous weather and says installation is mandatory. To ensure the protection of all citizens, it is necessary that every household installs this app. The app is downloadable via a QR code, but is of course Android only. Impersonating the legit government app Alert Swiss, the malicious app contains the banking Trojan Octo2. This is a fairly new malware variant and is designed to scoop up credentials from hundreds of apps, including of course your bank login creds. The official warning doesn't mention whether this app was being distributed on the actual Play Store, but of course it wouldn't be the first time. The bigger mystery though is why the bad guys resorted to the real world to spread their malware. I mean, sending physical mail ain't cheap. Via the Swiss Postal Service, you're looking at just 1 Swiss franc, roughly $1 for each letter, but that quickly adds up if you're sending these things en masse. It's likely the cybercriminals were carpet mailing specifically wealthy neighbourhoods. After all, Switzerland is probably a good place for that. But the easiest way to avoid falling for something like this is simply not to trust QR codes. Of course, there's sometimes just no avoiding these things, but the fact they're so commonly used for evil means that at this point there's no excuse not to manually copy the link before deciding whether you actually want to paste it into your browser. Even if you're just paying for parking and you've scanned that code 11 times before, you don't know if this time someone stuck a sticker on top of the legit code. But this is assuming, of course, the URL is malicious. If the app was in the Play Store, then scrutinizing the URL ain't going to get you very far. Next up, you might have heard that Andrew Tate's course platform suffered a bit of a data breach. The Real World, previously known as Hustlers University, sells courses on how you too can break free from the matrix and become rich like Andrew Tate, all for just $50 per month.
Traditional education is designed to create people who can build yachts, but the real world is designed to create people who will buy yachts.
But unfortunately for the platform students, the Tates spent way too much money on a fancy trailer and didn't have much left over for the platform's security. Whilst Andrew Tate was in the midst of streaming on Rumble, the chat was flooded with pro-trans and LGBT emojis. But this was far more than just a raid. Hackers announced that they grabbed 14 gigabytes of user data from the platform and submitted it to the non-profit distributed Denial of Secrets, which has made the entire dump available for download. A database on users was leaked, which contains usernames and user IDs, caused source content was also leaked, but worst of all, the contents of public and private chat logs are also in here. And I do not envy the job prospects of people that have been exposed, because whilst the dump is a little cumbersome to sift through, I mean, I almost crashed my computer searching for racial slurs, there is a lot of, shall we say, spicy speech in here, and it's only a matter of time until someone creates some kind of a web app which makes all of this data easily searchable. But don't worry, because according to Andrew Tate, this is all fake news. The guy seems to be in complete denial, saying he's never lost any private data, that this is a matrix attack, and is just being played up by the media in some kind of attempt to discredit him. The hackers behind the breach said the platform was hilariously insecure, and I believe them, because this isn't actually the first time it's been hacked. Back in July, researchers at Cyber News discovered a misconfigured database exposing 88 gigabytes of data, way more than the 14 gigabytes in the recent breach, and it was far worse, because students' email addresses, hashed passwords, and even session tokens were all in here, as opposed to the latest breach, which only really exposes usernames. But you probably didn't hear about the older breach, because the researchers did the responsible thing and reported it to the real world, which then fixed the issue before the data could be grabbed by hacktivists. But might I add, they didn't so much as thank the researchers. Next up, a Russian cyber espionage campaign is targeting Ukrainian military recruits. This is coming from researchers over at Google, who discovered Civil Defense, a Telegram channel that helps potential Ukrainian conscripts track the locations of military recruiters in real time. You can do that with their Civil Defense software, which, if you head over to their website, you can download for various platforms. But regardless of whichever you download, you'll be served a decoy mapping application which Google calls Sunspinner, with the final payload being Pure Stealer on Windows and Crackstrat on Android. Both are just commercial malware packages that you can buy for a couple bucks on cybercrime forums. These aren't anything special at all, they'll just hoover up your credentials and give the attacker a backdoor into your device. The website also claims to support Mac and iOS, but Google researchers say those payloads weren't available for analysis. And aside from just hacking potential recruits, the Telegram channel also had some 4D chess moves up its sleeves. So Civil Defense encourages users to upload videos of unfair actions from territorial recruitment centers. After all, bad behavior by the military does need to be reported. However, Google claims that within hours, these videos were then reposted on official Russian government social media pages for use in anti-Ukrainian propaganda designed to discredit their military. And in order to get traffic to their Telegram channel, the Russians bought ads on totally legit pro-Ukrainian Telegram channels. But regardless, after being exposed, the Civil Defense website is now dead. However, this is not the first time the Kremlin has targeted Ukrainian recruits, and no doubt they've already started cooking up something new. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.